How many of you believe in magic? Very few. How many of you don't? I mean, you don't belong to any teams. So, I think I'll talk about magic today. 2 years back, I was 25, and I'm sure that most of you have traveled much more than how much I have traveled when I was 25, and I was doing this corporate job. And since childhood, filmmaking was my passion. Again, ended up doing law because after losing my father, my mother wanted me to do a professional course. And I chose to do law in Pune, where Film Institute was just half a kilometer. And then ended up doing this corporate job for 1 year. Then one day I resigned, and I thought I'll travel. And then I got this opportunity to do a screenplay with legendary filmmaker I.V. sir for 1 year. After that, in 2015, I was diagnosed with depression and insomnia. And that was a very tough 6 months of my life. And I realized, and I wrote it down, that more than wars, more than rebellions, more than any external crisis that we have in the world, sometimes it's our own thoughts that we fear the most. And to get out of my situation, the only way was to remain thoughtless. That is when I left my home with 200 rupees in my pocket, traveling to Trivandrum, and from there to Kanyakumari. And 200 rupees was over in the first day itself. Then I started traveling penniless, mainly hitchhiking. How many of you know the term hitchhiking? So hitchhiking is to take free lifts in vehicles, mainly trucks, motorcycles, basically any vehicle. So that was my mode of transportation. I slept in streets, temples, bus stands, railway stations, and I asked people for food. I continued traveling, and I traveled almost 180 days without any penny. It was a journey which was totally dependent on the kindness of people. I had to trust strangers. I had to go and ask people for food. When you ask 10 people, somebody will offer you. That's still so kind. And it continued. And after 6 months of traveling, covering half of the country, when I came back home, I'll call myself the happiest man. And if that can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. And that exactly is what I call magic. Fjellraven happened this year, 2018. Again, Fjellraven was an expedition that is there from 1993. And for some weird reason, no Indian ever tried. They called me the first Indian to win Fjellraven Polar, not considering my problem with the idea of a nation. So, going back, I'll take you to my first Himalayan trip, and that is where I found magic. And let me tell you, magic is very much real. So I used to work in this corporate firm, which is less than 1 kilometer from here. So I used to be there in 2015. So I had this wallpaper of Himalayas in my computer, a random picture that I got from Google. I just wanted to travel. I was dreaming about travel, but I really couldn't. Once I started traveling, I was realizing that more you travel, more you will realize that you have traveled too less. I also realized that if you want to travel, you will travel no matter what. So I resigned from this job. I was starting to travel. I was going through my rakes, and I got this random book. It is called Livingston Seagull. How many of you have read this? No one? So it's basically a book about a seagull, Livingston Seagull. So what makes a seagull different is that every seagull fly in search of food. And this one particular seagull realizes that flying itself is a gift. And you must fly because you can fly, not because you can search for food. Flying is something to be embraced. And I started this journey reading this book, and I reached Manali. So I thought that I'll stop my journey at Manali because Manali was too much for me. Manali was a long trip for me. And I was sitting in this cafe in Old Manali. Then suddenly a picture struck my attention. It was a picture framed in the wall of the cafe. It was of a group of Himalayan peaks. That picture was so familiar to me. And I realized that this picture, this exact group of mountains, were the mountains that was there in my office laptop's wallpaper. Then suddenly I found a random post shared in Facebook by a friend of mine. It said that coincidences, synchronicities, and serendipities are all signs from the universe that you're on the right path. I looked around. I could see a lot of dream catchers flying in the air. And I decided that, I think I should go further. So I asked a couple of people about this range of mountains, and I realized that this is Baralacha range of mountains, which is on the path to Ladakh. And to be very frank, I was not having enough money to go further. And suddenly I got a call from Ravishesh sir, and he told me that I have asked the producer to send you some money and please check your account. And then that trip happened. In another 20 hours, I was standing right in front of the mountains, which used to be my wallpaper. If that is not magic, then what is magic? I kept traveling. I reached Ladakh. It was so beautiful. It was life-altering. I reached Pangung So, this very beautiful lake. I was sitting right there. I was completing this book and Livingston Seagull. Then I stood up. It was a very beautiful twilight. There was a lot of wind. I saw hundreds of seagulls flying down to the lake. And I was reminded again that magic is real. I was finding this weird but real, very real pattern in which the universe works. How many of you have heard of law of attraction? So law of attraction is a very familiar term, and law of attraction means that wherever our attention is, that is what we attract to our life. Our thoughts are being converted into a reality. It's a very shallow layer, the top layer of the concept. But going deep to the concept, I was constantly realizing that every person, every incident, every place, everything that happens to you is a connection, is a connecting dots. Is a connecting dot that takes you to another dot, and when these dots are connected, you find your magic. We have all played those puzzles and magazines that we used to get as kids, where we connect the dots so that we get a grand picture of what it actually is. And that is exactly how magic happens. When I was hitchhiking, basically I had to starve a lot. There were days when I used to get one samosa a day, one samosa 2 days. And I had this incident when I was in Baroda, when I bumped to this hotel and told them that, I may fall down, I may be unconscious, I want some food. And then they rushed to the kitchen and I told them that I don't have money. Then they asked me, what happened to your money? Somebody stole it from you? So I started explaining about how I was traveling and they couldn't believe. And all of these guys who were serving, everyone sat next to me listening to my stories. That is when I realized that our generation knows very much about praise, the praise to be paid. But there are certain things that are beyond the praises. It is a little thing that we call value, and our stories have a lot of value. And every time I tell my stories, I make sure that I make people believe that there is something called magic, and magic is all around. The hitchhiking trip was a life-changing trip for me when I realized that it is not a very dangerous place that we live in. It is not a world filled with thieves and criminals. Maybe that's what we read from our newspapers and see from our channels. But let me tell you, it is a world of a lot of kind people. I'm not denying the fact that there may be terrible things happening out there. But when 100 of us travel, maybe a bad incident can happen to one of us, but that doesn't stop us. We as a civilization, we as a tribe, we were raised and we still go on with a simple fact that we believe each other, we trust each other. It is the trust and belief that drives us together as a civilization, as mankind. And if you want to realize how strong that bond is, how strong love is, how strong goodness of people is, just go, just explore. Not planning your trips, not scheduling your flights and sorting the hotels, but just go. Just go to people, talk to them. You will have a lot of stories to tell them, and trust me, they'll have better stories. I have traveled in more than 500 trucks, and I realized that these drivers have much more stories than how much I had as a screenplay writer, as a filmmaker. They have seen India like we have never seen. They have seen India like much more than how your travel guide can tell you. There are a lot of stories out there. There are a lot of goodness out there. And if we travel right to the soul of it. And that is where the magic lies. I'll tell you a very life-changing, life-altering experience that I had in Rajasthan. I was in Ajmer district of Rajasthan, and I happened to stay with this NGO for like 12 days. This NGO is named Manthan, and when I reached there, they gave me food, of course. After 2 days, I was having a good meal. Otherwise, it's just samosas or a vada or something. As soon as I finished having my food, 2 kids came running. They took the plates away from me after I finished it, of course. They took the sand out of the ground and they started cleaning it. That is when I realized that there is such a terrible water scarcity that they have been facing. one day before that, I was traveling through this part of Gujarat when people were telling me that they'll be able to train, there'll be a lot of development right now, there'll be a lot of new highways. And then I heard that there is this struggle, there is this movement happening in Madhya Pradesh where a group of tribal people are standing in a place which is supposed to be a reservoir for a dam, where they are standing in water for last 17 hours, striking so that they won't sink. Their land won't sink when the dam comes. So we have a place where people are fighting against the water, racing to the level of their life, and we have another place in another 300 kilometers where people are dying because they don't have water. Manthan gave a lot of experience to me. I visited this house where we planted a solar plant, and then we gave them electricity. They got water supply. We built a borewell for them. Then a lot of people came to me and they gave me a watermelon as a gift. And when I was coming back from that place, Teja Ramji, the founder of Manthan, told me that this watermelon cost much more than the bucks that you pay in your hometown, because this watermelon can be the dinner for a whole family in this village. That was a realization. That was a realization of the country that I lived in. The country that I lived in for 25 years. And I never knew that a country like this existed. I met this lady other day who have took 3,000 deliveries because pregnant women can't go to hospitals there because there are no hospitals in like 60-kilometer radius there. I met a lot of beautiful human beings, and every time I meet a human being, I knew that these are lessons coming to me. These are lessons preparing me to know more than how much I knew. And in every single second of the journey, I was realizing that there are a lot of lessons. There are a lot of lessons that our schools, our colleges, our educational institutions missed to teach us. That is exactly what travel does to us. We may think that travel is a very overrated thing, but let me tell you, travel is not. Travel is much more than the social media pictures that we share. Travel is much more than what we see in YouTube videos. Travel is much more than all the fancy pictures that we see. Travel is much beyond that. And as I told you earlier, more you travel, more you will realize this. If you don't find magic, let me tell you, maybe you're not traveling right. Magic is everywhere. When I was in Rameshwaram, when I was sleeping near this temple where people normally stand in queues, there is a platform where you can actually sleep. I slept there and I could find a lot of people sleeping there because we live in a country where a lot of people have to sleep outside because they don't have a home. Then I had to walk for 24 kilometers to reach this place named Anjumuna, which is at the end of Dhanushkodi. I started my journey in 3 a.m. and almost covered all these places and reached this tea stall by afternoon. It was a long hour. It was a long hour of not having any food, not having tea, not having anything. So I got this one glass of tea, and then there was this smile of the chai wala. And that smile itself is magic. That smile itself makes you feel that more than the hunger of the stomach, more than the hunger of the body, there is this hunger of the soul. There is this hunger that you need to conquer more. You can't fall down. You have to go further. You have to see more. You have to explore more. And you have to find that there is something beyond what we have seen. This journey also made me to realize that maybe we don't appreciate whatever we have in our life. So I used to get a chai every day right from my childhood, and I could never appreciate a tea until that day. We have floors, we have walls, and we have roofs, and we have safe, comfortable bedrooms. And how many of you really appreciate the comfort that we have every day? I know even I have complained a lot of, about the things that I don't have, rather than appreciating the things that we have. My point is, when we go out of the comfort zone, that is when we actually realize how much comfort that we had. And further we travel from the comfort zone, further it gets hard. When it gets hardest, it feels so good. Trust me, it gets so good as a memory in retrospect. As they say, world is a playground. World is of course a playground, but it is a pretty big one. We know that in human history, nobody have covered all of it or even half of it. So we also know that sooner we start exploring, more we get to explore. So we are never late. We are never late to start exploring. And if you ask me why we should explore, it is because traveling is not an unconventional way of life. It is not something beyond the normal life. So we are all very familiar with the term normal life. Ask our parents and they can very easily tell us what a normal life is. Study more. Keep studying, and there comes a point when the study ends, and then we feel that the struggle is kind of over. That is when work starts, and we will realize that now it's a different ballgame. Before we get into all those cycles, I want to ask you to take a solo trip at least once every year. Because I'm sure that all of you will find magic. And remember, you will find magic as long as you believe in it. Thank you, everyone. And I'm asking all of you, I'm promising all of you that dreams do come true if you have the will to believe in them. Thank you.